Grace's voice on the phone caught me completely off guard after 15 years of silence. "Hi, Dad," she said, inviting me to Christmas dinner as if we'd never stopped talking. 15 years of ignored birthdays, unreturned calls, holidays spent alone, and now, suddenly, she remembered she had a father. I listened to her forced cheerfulness, my mind racing. Well, after such a long separation, I supposed I should bring something special, a gift that would truly mark this reunion, something memorable. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Grace's laugh was brittle, forced. "No, Dad, I'm not kidding. The holidays are coming up and, well, I'd like to have my father there." My father. The words hit me like a physical blow. For 15 years, I'd been nothing more than a ghost to her. No calls on Father's Day, no birthday wishes, nothing. And now, suddenly, I was her father again. "This is pretty unexpected, Grace. 15 years of silence. And now, maybe it's time to rebuild some traditions," she interrupted, her voice taking on that practiced sweetness I remembered from when she wanted something as a child. The audacity of it struck me like lightning. I felt my jaw clench, my free hand gripping the kitchen counter until my knuckles went white. The same counter where I'd eaten countless lonely dinners, where I'd stared at birthday cards I'd written but never sent, where I'd wondered what I'd done to deserve such complete abandonment. "Funny how I became worth rebuilding traditions with right after I won the lottery," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Hard not to notice the timing, Grace." "What?" Her surprise sounded genuine, but then again, Grace had always been good at playing innocent. She'd learned from the best. Her mother, Kate, was a master at manipulation wrapped in wounded feelings. "It's been in the Durham Herald-Sun for 3 days now, sweetheart. Local man wins $8 million in moneymaker drawing. Amazing how fast news travels when there's money involved." I could practically hear her mind working through the phone. The pause stretched too long, confirming everything I suspected. You won the lottery? I had no idea. But regardless, Dad, please come. We'd all love to see you. We'd all love to see you." The lies came so easily to her. I closed my eyes, remembering the last time I'd seen Grace, just 14 years old, standing in Kate's pristine living room, her young face already twisted with the same disgust I'd seen in her mother's eyes for years. A child poisoned against her own father. "Even Kate?" I asked, unable to keep the bitter edge from my voice. "Of course. Even my stepdad has forgotten old grudges. Everyone would be so happy to have you there." Forgotten old grudges. As if my ex-wife's systematic campaign to poison my daughter against me was just some minor disagreement. As if the restraining order Kate had threatened when I'd tried to maintain a relationship with Grace was just water under the bridge. But I found myself nodding, something cold and calculating settling in my chest. "Well then, I'll make sure to bring some really special gifts for everyone. It's been so long. I want to make this Christmas unforgettable." "That sounds wonderful, Dad. I can't wait to see you." The phone went silent in my hand, but the memories came flooding back like a dam bursting. 2008. The year everything fell apart, not just for me, but for everyone in real estate. The mortgage crisis hit Durham like a sledgehammer. Houses sat empty for months, for sale signs becoming tombstones in dead neighborhoods. My agency, built over 12 years of 18-hour days and weekend showings, crumbled in 6 months. I can still feel the weight of those final weeks, watching deals collapse one by one, clients walking away from deposits, everything I'd built crumbling around me. I kept the house and car payments current, even as the business died, believing Kate would stand by me, that our 15 years together meant something. God, I was naive. The moment Kate realized I couldn't maintain our lifestyle anymore, she found Samuel, a lawyer with the right connections, the right bank account, and most importantly, a future that didn't include financial uncertainty. Instead of supporting me through the worst crisis of my life, the woman I desperately loved became my enemy, wielding our intimacy like a weapon. Kate's voice still echoes in my memory from that courthouse, standing there in her new power suit paid for by Samuel's money, telling the judge I was a reckless failure who dragged his family into poverty. The way she said it, with such cold certainty, as if I hadn't sacrificed everything to give her the life she demanded. But the real knife came from Grace. My 14-year-old daughter standing beside her mother like a loyal soldier, nodding when Kate's lawyer painted me as the villain of our family's story. When the reporter from the Herald Sun approached her outside the courthouse, Grace didn't hesitate. Mom deserves to be happy. We'll be fine without him. We'll be fine without him. Those words became the headline of my public execution. The article ran under a banner that still makes my chest tighten. Local woman finds courage to start over. They painted Kate as some brave survivor escaping a toxic situation, while I became Durham's poster child for failure. After her husband's business failures threatened their family's stability, Kate Morrison chose courage over comfort, filing for divorce and rebuilding her life with her daughter, Grace. The whole piece was a masterclass in character assassination wrapped in inspiration porn. I never knew for certain, but I suspected Kate orchestrated that article herself. It wasn't enough to destroy me in private with her daily verbal assaults. She wanted the whole town to see my humiliation. Samuel's connections at the paper probably made it easy to plant the story, to craft the narrative where she was the hero and I was the cautionary tale. Kate got the house, the car, even my grandmother's antique dining set, the one thing I'd begged her to let me keep. Everything transferred to her new life with Samuel Patterson, my former lawyer who'd used every piece of confidential information I'd shared to orchestrate my complete destruction. I became a cautionary tale whispered at dinner parties, a reminder to other men about what happens when you lose your place in society. For months, I couldn't walk into a grocery store without feeling eyes on me, hearing the whispered conversations that died when I passed. But they made one crucial mistake in their perfect narrative. They thought breaking me meant destroying me. I remember my first day at Durham Moving and Storage, loading furniture into trucks with hands that once signed million-dollar contracts. The one-bedroom apartment I rented had water stains on the ceiling and carpet that smelled like decades of other people's failures. Every night I'd come home with my back screaming, my pride buried somewhere beneath the physical exhaustion. But I knew real estate. I understood markets, negotiations, human psychology. When you've spent 12 years learning every street in Durham, every neighborhood's rhythm, that knowledge doesn't just disappear because your business card does. I started small, weekend side deals, helping friends of friends buy modest homes, cash under the table while I loaded sofas and dining sets during the week. 3 years of that grinding routine, and I had enough to get my license back. 5 more years of 18-hour days, moving furniture at dawn, showing houses at dusk, and I'd built a small but steady client base. Nothing flashy, nothing that would attract Kate's attention or Samuel's legal scrutiny. Just quiet, methodical progress. By year 10, I'd moved out of that moldy apartment into a modest 2-bedroom house. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Got myself a reliable Honda, started taking actual vacations once a year. The next 7 years brought steady growth. More clients, better commissions, a comfortable routine. Still alone, but no longer desperate. The lottery ticket had become my tradition after every successful closing. Gas station coffee and a scratch-off to celebrate another good deal. This time, those 8 numbers changed everything. Everything. Even my daughter's sudden interest in having a father again. What bitter irony. They'd abandoned me because of money, and the moment they learned I had it again, they wanted to come back like nothing had ever happened. 3 weeks after Grace's call, I decided to test my theory. If they were only interested in my money, then a little financial uncertainty should reveal their true colors pretty quickly. I called Grace on a Tuesday evening, letting just enough panic creep into my voice. "Honey, I need to talk to someone. I think I might have made a terrible mistake." "Dad? What's wrong?" "It's the money, Grace. God, I think I lost most of it." The silence stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight, controlled. "What do you mean? Lost it? It's $8 million, Dad. How do you lose $8 million? "Well, first off, it wasn't really $8 million. I let out a shaky breath, the sound of a broken man. I took the lump sum payout instead of the annuity, got about $4.8 million before taxes. After Uncle Sam took his share, I was left with $3.4 million. I could practically hear her calculating, the disappointment bleeding through the phone line like poison. "But that's still," she started. Still a lot of money, I know. But I got greedy. Sweetheart, you remember how I always loved real estate? Well, I thought I could flip this commercial property downtown. The seller convinced me it was a sure thing. Mixed use development, city council approval already in place. I put 2.7 million into it. The lie rolled off my tongue smoothly. In reality, I had looked at that exact property, a rundown strip mall that the city was indeed planning to redevelop. Perfect cover story because anyone could verify the opportunity existed. The permits got held up, I continued, my voice cracking with manufactured despair. Environmental issues they hadn't disclosed. Now the whole deal's tied up in court and my money's locked in escrow. My lawyer says it could be months, maybe a year before I see any of it back, if I see it back at all. Grace's breathing had changed, shorter, sharper. So how much do you actually have right now? Maybe 350,000 after the house payments, car, living expenses. I paused. I'm not poor, but I'm certainly not lottery winner rich anymore. Another silence. This one felt different, colder. Dad, I'm sure it will work out, she said finally, but the warmth had drained from her voice like water from a broken cup. These things have a way of resolving themselves. You're right, I said, injecting false hope into my tone. And hey, Christmas is still on, right? I'm looking forward to seeing everyone. Of course, she replied, but I caught the hesitation. We'll figure out the details closer to the date. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at my actual bank balance on my phone screen. 3.4 million, safely earning interest in a high-yield account. The commercial property story was perfect, verifiable but complicated enough that they wouldn't dig too deep. Now I just had to wait and see how quickly the Christmas invitation would disappear. I didn't have to wait long. Kate called the next evening, her voice dripping with honey and concern. Raymond, it's so wonderful to hear your voice again, she gushed up, as if the last 15 years of silence had been some unfortunate misunderstanding. Grace told me about your terrible situation with that property deal. You know, Samuel is such a high-class attorney. He's handled cases exactly like this before. I'm sure he could help get your money back much faster than whoever you're using now. Here it comes, I thought, feeling that familiar knot of anger tightening in my chest. Let me get Samuel on the line, Kate continued before I could respond. Samuel, come talk to Raymond. The phone rustled, and then that voice, smooth as aged whiskey and twice as poisonous, filled my ear for the first time in 15 years. Raymond, good to hear from you, buddy. His tone was casual, almost jovial. Listen, I want you to know that I forgave you long ago for everything that happened back then. Water under the bridge, you know? So don't worry about any awkwardness between us. The sheer audacity of it hit me like a physical blow. This man, who had sat at my dinner table, who had used my confidential information to destroy me, who had stolen my wife and turned my daughter against me, was forgiving me. A laugh escaped my throat, cold and sharp as winter wind. You forgave me? How magnanimous of you, Samuel. How absolutely generous of you. I could feel his confidence wavering through the silence that followed. Look, I continued, savoring every word, I've been handling my problems on my own for the past 15 years. I think I'll stick with that approach. Thanks, but no thanks. Raymond, don't be stubborn, Samuel started, that lawyer voice creeping in. I'm offering to help here. This could benefit everyone. I hung up. The click of the receiver felt like the most satisfying sound I'd heard in years. But they weren't done with me yet. A few days later, Grace called, her voice tight with barely contained panic. Dad, I'm afraid I have some bad news. We might have to cancel Christmas this year. The words tumbled out quickly, rehearsed. We're having some financial problems, small business issues, nothing major, but there are some holes in the budget we need to fill. If you could help us out, just temporarily, we could still have that wonderful family celebration we planned. I let the silence hang between us, counting the seconds of her discomfort. How much are we talking about? I finally asked. It's really not that much in the grand scheme of things, about 70,000. I know it sounds like a lot, but when your deal gets resolved... Grace, I interrupted, my voice deadly calm. Even if I had $70,000 just lying around collecting dust, I wouldn't give you a single cent. Dad, please, you don't understand. Kate's voice suddenly cut through the line like a knife. She'd been listening on another extension the entire time, of course. Raymond, For God's sake, it's only 70,000. When your deal gets resolved, you'll have your millions back. She's your daughter. Doesn't that mean anything to you anymore? Something inside me snapped. 15 years of buried rage came pouring out. You want to know what means something, Kate? Those years when you literally threatened me with new lawsuits every time I tried to be part of my daughter's life. Those birthday cards I sent that came back unopened. Those Christmas letters I wrote, pouring my heart out that you made sure Grace never even saw. Do those mean something? Or how about this? Samuel's such a high-class attorney, right? Such a good provider? Let him solve your $70,000 problem. Kate's voice turned to pure venom. You haven't changed one bit over all these years, Raymond. Still the same selfish, pathetic excuse for a father you always were. And you're still the same manipulative person you always were, I said quietly. Good to know some things never change. The line went dead with a sharp click. As I replayed the conversation in my mind, everything became crystal clear. Just as I'd suspected, they had no interest in me beyond my money. Their reaction to my supposed financial troubles confirmed everything I'd believed about their motives. But something didn't add up. $70,000. That wasn't exactly pocket change, but it wasn't an impossible sum either. Samuel was a successful attorney with 15 years of career growth since our divorce. With their combined incomes and his connections, they should have been able to handle a temporary cash flow problem like this. The fact that they'd swallowed their pride enough to ask me, the man they'd publicly humiliated and cast aside, meant their situation was more desperate than they were letting on. Kate's willingness to put Samuel on the phone to orchestrate that whole charade about forgiveness told me they were scrambling. Something was definitely wrong in their perfect little world, and I needed to find out exactly what that something was. My curiosity about their desperation got the better of me. 2 days after that heated phone call, I decided to do a little digging. After 15 years in the real estate business, twice, you learn that information flows through certain channels. Lawyers, bankers, accountants, real estate agents, we all talk, especially in a town the size of Durham. I started with Vincent Caldwell, a seasoned commercial real estate broker who'd been handling deals longer than anyone in the city and had a memory like a steel trap for every transaction, every player, every scandal that had ever touched Durham's legal and business community. Samuel Patterson? Vincent's voice carried a note of surprise when I called. Haven't heard that name in a while, Ray. Why the interest? I kept my tone casual, professional. Came up in conversation. You know how it is. You hear a name, wonder what happened to people. Vincent chuckled, but there was something darker underneath. Well, let's just say the Golden Boy's lost some of his shine. Word around town is he's been struggling for the past couple of years. Lost some big clients, made some questionable investments. My pulse quickened. How bad are we talking? Bad enough that he had to let go most of his staff last year. Remember that fancy office building he bought on Main Street, the one with his name in gold letters on the door? Vincent paused for effect. He's been trying to sell it for 8 months. No takers at his asking price, and he can't afford to go much lower. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. What about the practice itself? Hemorrhaging money, from what I hear. Delilah Chen, you remember her, the court clerk? She told me he's been showing up to hearings looking, well, let's just say not his usual polished self. Stress does things to a man. After I hung up with Vincent, I made a few more calls. Each conversation added another piece to the puzzle. Samuel's law firm had lost 3 major corporate clients in the past 18 months. There were whispers about missed deadlines, sloppy work, desperation moves that had backfired spectacularly. My final call was to Theodore Blackwood, a financial advisor who'd supported me during my darkest years after the 2008 crash. When I was loading furniture during the day and trying to rebuild my real estate career at night, Theodore had recommended me to several of his clients who needed honest, hard-working representation. Theodore knew everyone's business, often before they did themselves. Raymond, good to hear from you, Theodore said warmly. I heard about your lottery win. Congratulations. 8 million, that's incredible. After what you went through 15 years ago, it's like the universe finally decided to balance the scales. Can't complain. Listen, Theodore, I'm curious about something. Samuel Patterson, Kate's husband. How's he doing financially these days? The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know before Theodore even spoke. I probably shouldn't say this, but Theodore lowered his voice. They came to see me about 6 months ago. Debt consolidation, emergency refinancing, the works. It's bad, Ray. Really bad. I'm talking about possible bankruptcy if they can't turn things around in the next few months. Bankruptcy? I couldn't hide the surprise in my voice. The man leveraged everything during the good years. Big house, expensive cars, private school for the stepdaughter. Excuse me, for Grace. When the clients started leaving, the whole house of cards began tumbling down. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair, staring at the wall of my home office. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. Samuel Patterson, the man who'd helped destroy my life during my own financial crisis, was now facing the exact same fate. No wonder they'd been so eager to reconnect with me. No wonder Kate had been willing to put her new husband on the phone despite the obvious awkwardness. They weren't just looking for a quick 70,000, they were looking for a lifeline. And they thought I was it. Armed with the knowledge of Samuel and Kate's desperate financial situation, I decided it was time to turn the tables. 3 days after my conversation with Theodore, I picked up the phone and called Grace. The anticipation in my chest felt electric, like a chess player who's finally seen the winning move 10 steps ahead. Grace, honey, I have some wonderful news, I said, letting genuine excitement color my voice. Dad, what is it? You're not going to believe this, but the real estate deal resolved itself. The environmental issues were cleared up faster than anyone expected, and I got my money back, the whole $2.7 million. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. I counted them. That's incredible. Grace's voice practically vibrated with barely contained excitement. So you're back to being, well, wealthy again? There it is, I thought. The naked greed she couldn't quite hide, even when trying to play the loving daughter. I suppose I am, I said with a chuckle that I hoped sounded modest rather than calculating, which means Christmas is definitely back on the table. I know I couldn't help with your little financial situation before, but at least we can celebrate properly now. Oh, Dad, that's such a relief. I was so worried about you when you told me what happened. A man your age shouldn't have to deal with that kind of stress. A man my age, as if I were some doddering old fool instead of someone who'd rebuilt his entire life from nothing. But I bit my tongue and played along. You're sweet to worry about your old man, I said. But everything worked out in the end. Sometimes patience really does pay off. It really does, Grace agreed, though I could hear her mind working through the phone. You know, Dad, about what we discussed before, our little cash flow problem. I mean, now that you have your money back, maybe. She let the sentence hang there, a fishing line cast into deep water. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. You know what, sweetheart? Christmas is a time for giving, isn't it? Let me think about it. Maybe I will help out with your 70,000 after all. The sharp intake of breath was audible through the phone. Really? Dad, that would be... we would be so grateful. It would solve everything. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves, I said, pulling back just enough to keep the hook sharp. I said I'd think about it. Christmas is still a few weeks away, but yes, it's possible. Very possible. Thank you so much for even considering it. You have no idea what this means to us. Oh, but I do, I thought. I know exactly what it means. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a few minutes, savoring the moment. Grace had revealed her true nature so completely, so nakedly, that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I pulled out my laptop and began researching the Durham Herald-Sun's current staff. The newspaper landscape had changed dramatically since my public humiliation 15 years ago, but local papers still loved a good scandal, especially one involving prominent community figures. After an hour of searching, I found exactly who I was looking for: Miranda Wells, the Herald-Sun's investigative reporter who specialized in business and legal affairs. According to her bio, she'd won awards for exposing corruption in local government and had a particular talent for uncovering financial improprieties. Perfect. I called the newspaper's main line and asked to be transferred to Miss Wells. Miranda Wells speaking, came a crisp, professional voice. Miss Wells, My name is Raymond Morrison. I believe I have a story that might interest you and your readers. What kind of story, Mr. Morrison? I leaned back in my chair, feeling the satisfying weight of knowledge and power. The kind that involves a prominent Durham attorney, financial fraud, client fund mismanagement, and a very public fall from grace. The kind that sells newspapers and wins awards. There was a pause, then her voice became more focused, more interested. I'm listening. Samuel Patterson, you know the name? Of course, high-profile attorney, handles major corporate cases, married to. She stopped. Wait, Morrison, you're the ex-husband. Guilty as charged, I said with a dry laugh. But this isn't about old grudges, Miss Wells. This is about justice and truth. Two things I think you value highly based on your reporting history. What exactly are you alleging, Mr. Morrison? I'm not alleging anything yet, but I have information, documents, financial records, witness statements that suggest Mr. Patterson has been less than honest with his clients about their trust funds. Money that was supposed to be held in escrow accounts seems to have found its way into some very questionable investments. This wasn't entirely true, of course. I had suspicions and secondhand information, but no smoking gun. Not yet. But Miranda didn't need to know that. These are serious accusations, she said carefully. They are indeed. The kind that destroy careers and send people to prison. The kind that make headlines. Why come to me? Why now? I'd prepared for this question. Because Patterson destroyed my life 15 years ago, Miss Wells. He used confidential information from when he was my attorney to help my ex-wife take everything I owned. He then stood by while she orchestrated a character assassination campaign through your very newspaper. I've spent 15 years rebuilding my life, and now I discover he's been playing fast and loose with client funds while living the high life. And you want revenge. I want justice, I corrected. Revenge is petty, emotional. Justice is what happens when the truth finally comes to light. Another pause. What kind of evidence are we talking about? Bank records showing transfers between client accounts and Patterson's personal investments. Email communications discussing the movement of funds. Witness statements from former employees who were concerned about these practices. All lies, but plausible lies. And sometimes, in my experience, when you point an investigative reporter in the right direction with the right questions, they tend to find the evidence you need them to find. I'd need to verify everything independently, of course, Miranda said. Of course. I wouldn't expect anything less. But, Miss Wells, I think you'll find this story has everything your readers love. A corrupt lawyer, missing money, a powerful man brought low by his own greed. It's Shakespearean, really. If what you're suggesting is true, yes, it would make quite a story. Then you'll look into it? I'll consider it. Can you get me those documents you mentioned? Absolutely. But Miss Wells, time is of the essence here. I have reason to believe Patterson is planning to declare bankruptcy soon, which could complicate asset recovery for his victims. The sooner this comes to light, the more likely it is that justice can be served. I understand. Give me your contact information and I'll be in touch. After I hung up, I sat back and smiled. Miranda Wells would start asking questions, pulling threads, following leads. And in a town like Durham, where everyone knows everyone else's business, those questions would eventually reach Samuel's ears. The irony was exquisite. 15 years ago, Samuel had used the Herald-Sun to destroy me. Now I was going to use the very same newspaper to return the favor. But first, I had a Christmas to prepare for, a very special Christmas indeed. The Patterson house looked exactly like I remembered it, my former house, with its perfectly manicured lawn and gleaming windows that had once reflected my dreams. Now, walking up the familiar stone pathway on Christmas Eve, I felt like a stranger approaching a monument to someone else's life. Kate answered the door wearing a red velvet dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her smile was radiant, practiced, the kind you reserve for wealthy relatives and important clients. "Raymond, you look wonderful," she gushed, air kissing my cheeks as if we were old friends meeting for lunch instead of divorced spouses with 15 years of bad blood between us. Come in, come in. Grace has been so excited all day." The house smelled like pine and expensive candles, with undertones of roasted turkey and anxiety. Samuel emerged from what used to be my study, extending his hand with that lawyer's smile I remembered so well. Raymond, good to see you again, he said, his grip firm, but his eyes calculating. Grace tells us you've had quite the reversal of fortune with that property deal. Fortune has a way of evening things out, I replied, squeezing his hand just a fraction longer than necessary. Sometimes what looks like a loss turns out to be exactly what you needed. Grace appeared in the doorway, looking beautiful and nervous. At 29, she carried herself with Kate's poise but had my eyes, though I wondered if she'd inherited anything else from me besides genetics. Dad! She hugged me tightly, and for a moment, I almost forgot why I was here. Almost remembered what it felt like to be her father instead of her target. I'm so glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart. Dinner was an elaborate affair. Fine china, crystal glasses, the works. They'd pulled out all the stops, treating me like visiting royalty. Samuel regaled us with stories from his law practice, carefully avoiding any mention of recent difficulties. Kate played the perfect hostess, ensuring my wine glass never emptied and my plate stayed full. Grace, meanwhile, kept glancing at the beautifully wrapped packages under their massive Christmas tree, her anticipation palpable. I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes, calculating, wondering how much her dear old dad might be willing to part with for his loving family. This is lovely, I said, gesturing at the opulent display around us. You've certainly maintained a beautiful home. We've been blessed, Samuel said, though I caught the slight tightness around his eyes when he said it. Yes, Kate added quickly, though we believe in sharing our blessings with those we love. Though subtle, I thought, about as subtle as a sledgehammer. After dinner, we moved to the living room for presents. I watched them exchange expensive gifts, jewelry for Kate, a new watch for Samuel, designer clothes for Grace. They thanked each other with the kind of theatrical gratitude that made my skin crawl. Finally, all eyes turned to me. Dad, Grace said, her voice sweet as honey, we didn't expect anything from you, especially after everything you've been through lately. But, Kate added with a meaningful look, we were hoping that maybe, given the season and your recent good fortune, I smiled, reaching into my jacket pocket. Funny you should mention that. I do have something special for you. The anticipation in the room was thick enough to cut. Samuel leaned forward slightly. Kate's breathing quickened. Grace's eyes lit up like a child's on Christmas morning. That's when I heard it, the sound of car doors slamming outside, followed by footsteps on the front walk. The doorbell rang. Samuel frowned. Were we expecting someone? Kate shook her head, looking puzzled. Not that I know of. The doorbell rang again, followed by sharp knocking. I'll get it, Samuel said, rising from his chair. But before he could reach the door, it opened, and Miranda Wells stepped inside, followed by a photographer and another reporter I didn't recognize. Samuel Patterson? Miranda's voice cut through the Christmas warmth like a blade. Miranda Wells, Durham Herald-Sun, we'd like to ask you some questions about allegations of client fund misappropriation. The color drained from Samuel's face so quickly I thought he might faint. Kate gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Grace looked back and forth between the reporters and her stepfather, confusion and dawning horror warring on her features. What is this? Samuel stammered. This is private property. You can't just... We can ask questions in a public place, Mr. Patterson, the photographer said, already snapping photos. Would you prefer to answer them here or outside? Kate found her voice. Get out! Get out of our house this instant. Miranda's eyes found mine across the room. Mr. Morrison, isn't it? You were the one who contacted us about this story. Every eye in the room swiveled toward me. The silence was deafening. Grace's voice was barely a whisper. Dad, what's happening? I stood slowly, feeling the weight of 15 years settling on my shoulders like a familiar coat. When I spoke, my voice was calm, measured, final. What's happening, Grace, is justice. These are the people I told you about, the ones who took everything from me when I needed them most, the ones who laughed at my downfall, who turned my own daughter against me, who used my darkest moment to build their perfect life. Kate's face had gone white. Raymond, what have you done? What you did to me 15 years ago, I replied. I gave them the truth. Samuel stepped forward, his lawyer instincts kicking in despite his obvious panic. This is harassment. These are baseless accusations from a bitter ex-husband. Are they baseless, Mr. Patterson? Miranda interrupted. Because our investigation has uncovered some very interesting patterns in your client trust account management. Our investigation. I had to admire Miranda's thoroughness. Once pointed in the right direction, she'd obviously found real dirt. Samuel's face confirmed it. Grace was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Dad, I don't understand. Why would you do this to us? The pain in her voice almost broke me. Almost. But then I remembered every returned letter, every unanswered phone call, every birthday and Christmas spent alone. Because, sweetheart, when your family fell apart 15 years ago, when your father lost everything and needed support more than ever, what did you do? You chose sides. You stood in a courtroom and publicly declared that you'd be fine without me. Tears were streaming down her face now. I was 14 years old. And when you grew up, when you turned 18, 20, 25, when did you ever reach out? When did you ever wonder how your father was doing? She opened her mouth, then closed it, because we both knew the answer. But the moment you heard I had money again, I continued, suddenly I was family. Suddenly Christmas mattered. Suddenly you remembered you had a father. Kate found her voice venomous and shaking. So this is revenge? Destroying people's lives for revenge? No, Kate, this is consequences. You taught me 15 years ago that family means nothing when money's involved, that blood doesn't matter when someone becomes inconvenient, that people are only as valuable as their bank accounts. I turned to address Miranda and her team directly. These are the people who, when faced with their own financial crisis, didn't come to me honestly asking for help. They didn't apologize for 15 years of silence. They manipulated, they guilted, they tried to use the very family bonds they'd severed to solve their problems. Samuel was backing toward the hallway. I'm calling my lawyer. Good luck with that, I said calmly. I hear you're having trouble paying the ones you have. Miranda stepped forward with her recorder. Mr. Morrison, could you elaborate on the family dynamics that led to your decision to come forward with these allegations? I looked around the room, at Kate's fury, at Samuel's panic, at Grace's devastation, and felt something I hadn't experienced in 15 years. Complete peace. When people show you who they really are, I said, believe them. These people showed me that I was only valuable for what I could provide. When I couldn't provide it, I ceased to exist. When they thought I could provide it again, I magically became family. Grace was sobbing now. Dad, please, we can fix this. We can be a real family. No, sweetheart, we can't. Because real families don't abandon each other when times get hard. Real families don't disappear for 15 years and reappear when they need money. Real families support each other through the worst moments, not just the profitable ones. I walked toward the door, past the reporters, past the wreckage of their Christmas celebration. At the threshold, I turned back one last time. Merry Christmas, I said. I hope you get exactly what you deserve. The Herald Sun article ran 2 days after Christmas, front page above the fold. Prominent attorney under investigation for client fund violations. The story detailed Samuel's alleged misuse of client trust funds, his mounting debts, and the financial house of cards that was finally collapsing. But it was the sidebar that really caught my attention. A father's courage, breaking free from toxic family dynamics. Miranda had interviewed me the day after Christmas, and her article perfectly captured what I'd told her about finding the strength to walk away from people who only valued me for my money. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to stop enabling those who've repeatedly shown they don't value you as a person, the article quoted me as saying. I spent 15 years rebuilding my life, and I refuse to let greed disguise itself as family love. The article went on to detail the investigation into Samuel's practice, with hints that criminal charges might be forthcoming. The State Bar Association had already announced they were launching their own investigation. As for me, I was sitting in my comfortable home office looking at my bank balance, still 3.4 million strong, and planning a vacation to Europe. Alone, by choice, and happier than I'd been in decades. My phone had been ringing all morning. Grace, Kate, even Samuel. I'd stopped answering after the third call. There was nothing left to say. Sometimes the best family is the one you choose for yourself, and sometimes the greatest act of love is walking away from people who've proven they don't deserve your presence in their lives. I was finally free. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. And as always, thank you for watching.